Good afternoon and welcome to the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Senator Justin Wayne. I represent Legislative District 13, which is North Omaha and Northeast Douglas County. I am the chair of the Urban Affairs Committee. We will start off having members introduce themselves, starting with my left, Senator Lowe.
John Lowe, District 37, southeast half of Buffalo County.
John Arch, District 14, Sarpy County, Papillion La Vista.
Also assisting us is our committee page, Katie Kassane. She's from Chicago with a political science major and sociology major, and we have our staff members. Self-introduction.
Trevor Fitzgerald, Community Legal Counsel.
Angelina Cruz, Committee Clerk.
In light of the ongoing COVID pandemic, we respectfully request you to wear your mask. I have mine right here, but if you're testifying like I am talking right now, we ask you to remove your mask to make sure transcribers and the committee members can hear you and understand your testimony correctly. This afternoon, we will hear one bill, and we will be taking this amendment up in this bill. If you wish to testify, please make sure you have a blue testifier sheet. Fill that out so we can hand it to Angelina so we can have accurate records. Please know that if you wish to have your position listed on the committee statement for a particular bill, you must testify during that position, during that bill. And if you do not wish to testify but would like to record your position on the bill, please fill out a gold sheet near the entrance. Also note that the legislature policy is that all letters for the record must be received via online comment portal by noon the day prior to the hearing. Any handouts, please make sure you have 10 copies. If you don't have 10 copies, please give it to the page before you come up so we can make sure you have 10 copies while you're testifying. Testimony for each bill will begin with the introducer's opening statement. After the opening statement, we will hear from supporters of the bill, then from opposition, followed by those speaking in neutral capacity. The introducer of the bill will then have an opportunity to close if they wish to do so. We ask that you begin your testimony by stating your first and last name and spell them for the record. We will be using the 3-minute light system today. When you begin your testimony, the light will be turned green, it'll turn yellow with the 1-minute mark, and red, we ask you to wrap up your thoughts. I would like to remind everyone, including senators, to please turn off or silence your cell phones. With that, we will begin with AM1737. Welcome, Senator Hansen, to Urban Affairs Committee.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Wayne and fellow members of the Urban Affairs Committee. I appreciate you being here this afternoon. I appreciate the committee's willingness to hear the issues today. For the record, my name is Matt Hansen, M-A-T-T-H-A-N-S-E-N, and I represent District 26 in Northeast London. I'm here today to introduce AM1737 to LB 446, which is a straightforward amendment that would require the governor to apply for federal funding available to Nebraska for a second round of emergency rental assistance. This amendment replaces the original language of the bill, which was chosen as a vehicle for this hearing due to its focus on housing funding. Some background. So last year, the federal government made emergency rental assistance available to states to help households struggling through the COVID-19 pandemic. Our state government contracted with Deloitte and partnered with the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority, or NIFA, to create our program and disperse the funds. Under this program, individuals are eligible for up to 12 months of back rent and 3 months of future rent, up to $20,000, which is paid directly to their landlords. Recently, the state has declined to apply for a second round of this funding, leaving over $120 million on the table. That money has already been allocated and will simply go to other states if we fail to accept it. The spend down date for the second round of funding would be in 2025, which would give us 3 more years of this program. Currently, 48 other states have accepted the second round of funding. Our failure to apply for this money will have a direct negative impact on families in your districts. You've may have heard that the first pot of money was underutilized, but this appears to be the result of issues with the application, lack of outreach and awareness, and the state's decision to define what the money could be spent on. These are all issues we can fix going forward, but only if we apply before the deadline. We know a successful state program is possible, as evidenced by the improvements to the Omaha and Lincoln programs and what they have made to successfully spend down their funding. Although we missed the first deadline, this Treasury Department has extended the deadline to March 30th of this year to give us a chance to change our minds. I hope you'll listen to testimony today from across the state, from folks who are on the ground in their communities and understand the urgency of utilizing these federal dollars. I would like to thank them for being here today and for their advocacy. The governor has said in his reasoning in not accepting the funds is that because he doesn't see the need. I hope today, first and foremost, that need comes through loud and clear. I'll note that for the record that any version of this bill moving forward will need an emergency clause in order to allow enactment before the March 30th deadline. And I believe committee council has drafted some suggested language, which I'm supportive of. Additionally, I've handed out a few handouts that couldn't be made in time for the record. And I would ask the committee members to look at them and consider them part of the committee record. With that, I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Breeze.
Thank you, Chairman Wayne. And can you say again how the existing funds were underutilized? I think you gave maybe 3 reasons.
Yeah, so kind of, so some of which is kind of difficulty with the application. People could speak to this in more depth, but when you compare the state application to the Lincoln application, I think the state application had basically more requirements. That partners with kind of an overall lack of awareness and outreach. There were people who were eligible who simply just didn't know they were eligible. And as well as kind of the final thing was we limited the dollars. We didn't necessarily apply it to everything we could. Some of the things you can do are, for example, utility assistance and other things that I think the state just could have spent the money on but chose not to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here. And just so the, no, never mind, it's at 1:30. I'm used to having other hearings going on. I was gonna say people come and go to other hearings, but today's at noon. Welcome to your urban affairs.
No, it's all. It's just making sure I didn't hand you everything else. Twice in 2 weeks. How lucky.
Welcome.
Welcome. Chairman Wayne, members of the Urban Affairs Committee, my name is Dr. Erin Feistinger, ERINFEICHTINGER, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Policy at Together, located in Omaha, here in support for AM1737. As Senator Hansen stated, the U.S. Treasury currently has $120,515,161.80 set aside for Nebraskans struggling to pay for their rent and utilities. And as you know by now, Nebraska is one of 2 states. We joined Arkansas in not applying for this funding. It has been said there's not a need for this funds, and I think you will find today and in the coming days that this idea is categorically false. In your materials, you'll find a breakdown of the first round of ERA funds distributed by the state program, broken out by county and legislative district. You'll hear the stories of these communities and their needs from the testifiers behind me. Just to give you an example of the need, in Douglas County Eviction Court this week, there were 135 hearings scheduled, the most since March 2020. 121 of those were for non-payment. Our organization's experience in distributing close to $8 million in ERA from the Omaha program since June 2021 and currently working through hundreds of requests for help also undermine the argument that there is no need. Furthermore, the federal government has allowed for broader uses of ERA funds. 10% of the total that we receive can be used for housing stabilization services, which is a category intentionally broad and vague enough that we could creatively solve a lot of the larger issues around housing stability, and for which ARPA requests have already been made to this body, thereby providing another funding source for us to address housing issues in our communities and reducing the need for ARPA. It has also been argued that we should not apply for these funds because our existing process is too cumbersome. I want to be very clear that the federal government has, by design, allowed for broad flexibility in each individual program distributing ERA funds. The idea being that we would know our communities better than the federal government does. And this means that any inefficiencies in our state program are by our own design. And this means, too, that we can fix those inefficiencies, but we cannot do so if we don't apply for these funds. I might also point out that 15% of our total ERA allocation in the ERA2 program can be used to cover any and all administrative costs associated with the program, including outreach, staffing, and technology. This 15% is an increase from the 10% of ERA1. and is what we have used to cover the cost of our contract with Deloitte for our existing program, who, per the terms of their contract, could be paid up to $8.9 million to design and implement an ERA program that has distributed just $14.9 million to date.
Can you wrap up your thoughts?
Yep, absolutely. Just also in your packet, taken from Nebraska's website, current eligibility requirements and eligible uses of the funds. You'll note that our current program does not explicitly require COVID impact in the same way that ERA 2 does not explicitly require it. But again, we have flexibility to do that. Thanks for your thoughtful consideration, and I am happy to answer any and all of your questions.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Arch.
Thank you for coming to testify today. I have a question. I kind of stumbled on the statement about Deloitte. They will be paid $8.9 million to design and implement a program that distributes $14.9 million.
So the contract that the state signed, the Nebraska Military Department and the Nebraska Emergency Management have signed this contract with Deloitte to design the program, assess and review all the applications, also maintain the records that need to be reported to the federal government, which are fairly minimal. And the contract allows for them to be paid up to $8.9 million for this first round of ERA.
Up to.
Up
I
to,
guess is-
yes.
All right, thank you.
Sorry if I didn't make that clear.
You have to raise your hand. Senator Hunt. Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Chairman Wayne. So a lot of us have followed the governor's comments about this ERA funding. He has said that it's really cumbersome to apply for, but you've said that the federal government gives the states a lot of broad flexibility to use it. So can you tell me what is it that the federal government requires of states applying for this funding?
Yeah, so the federal government does have certain reporting requirements right now for our current program. ERA 1 requires a monthly report from any of the programs. There's 2 questions in that report. It's a high-level count of households receiving assistance and also the amount distributed. Quarterly reports are required to the federal government. This is like a recipient profile. So like, we're the state of Nebraska. Here's our tax ID. A project overview, recipients, subawards, direct contracts, and also any entity like a corporate landlord or something receiving over $30,000 total from that program. And there would also be certain demographic data collected, like race, ethnicity, sex, household size, how many months they're applying for, all stuff that you would collect in the normal course of the application.
So
And
to
really-
you, as someone who works in this field, is that cumbersome?
That's not, the federal guidelines are not particularly cumbersome. I don't think we as a state, and we have a testifier behind me who can speak more directly to the federal requirements, but the state has opted not to adopt the more flexible requirements that the federal government has offered to states, such as fact-based proxies or not requiring as much documentation like pay stubs, income.
And that's a choice.
That's a choice that the state has made. So we designed our program, and that's why it is also within our power to redesign it. And I think the examples of Omaha's efficiency in distributing funds, as well as Lincoln Lancaster, and that was in Omaha particularly, the city of Omaha immediately transferred it to an organization that had experience distributing funds like this and knew the communities that they would be distributing to. So we were able to design a more flexible program that has more efficiently distributed funding.
Another thing the governor has said is that he thinks there's a lot of fraud in this program. What do you know about any fraud, if anything?
So
Have you
as
seen that in
of
Douglas County or?
as of February 2nd, from what I understand, there have been 843 applications flagged as fraudulent in the state program, which is about 13%. That said, only 20 of those, of that 843, have been sent ahead to the state patrol for investigation. So I don't know what exactly that says, but those 843 could have moved through the process later after follow-up to see, maybe you typed in your address wrong or something like that. And other states have reported less than 1% of fraud. So either Nebraskans are particularly fraudulent actors, which I don't believe, or that's another, process that we can work through in a second round of funding, is figuring out what's going on there.
Okay. And another thing you mentioned was housing stabilization services. Can you briefly mention what you mean by that?
Sure. Again, the federal government has made that category broad, intentionally so, to allow flexibility in communities to meet their unique and specific needs. What we've been able to do with 10% of funding from other programs, not the state's program, but in Douglas County, we allocated 10% of the ERA1 funds to the Nebraska State Bar Volunteer Lawyers Project to provide free volunteer legal counsel for people facing evictions, which has reduced our immediate eviction rate and allowed for a lot more homeless prevention services than we've ever been able to provide. Lancaster and Lincoln have also recently made the same move. We could do things like staff for emergency housing programs. We could get creative and figure out, do we need more case managers? Do we need outreach? Do we need someone, really, there's organizations behind me that would be able to talk about the programs that they run, that this would be able to help, but that would be 10% of 120 million is 12 million for us to be able to figure out these situations that we wouldn't otherwise have.
And I have one more clarifying question about the fraud. You said 20 cases out of how many were sent to the state patrol?
843.
843 and how many applications were there total? Because you said 843 was like 13%.
Yeah, so I think there's something like 67, a little over 6,700 awards so far in the state's program as of February 9th.
And that doesn't include how many applications?
Yeah, I think the closest number that I could give you, and I can get you the exact number and follow up with you, but a little over 11,000 since the start of the program.
So 20 out of 11,000 is not like an insane amount of fraud.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I have a few questions. Wow, I got a lot of questions actually.
I hopefully have a lot of answers, but who
Douglas
knows?
County and Lancaster aren't included in a lot of this data. Do you know why?
Yeah, so the federal government allocated ERA funds to 5 different jurisdictions. So Douglas received money, Lancaster received money, the city of Omaha received money, and the city of Lincoln received money. Everything outside of that is the balance of state, which is covered by the state program. So that's where we're at.
So how would the second round impact Douglas and Lancaster County?
I imagine it would look a lot like what we've just recently done with the statewide program, which is reallocate 84.7 million from our initial ERA1 allocation of 158 million. And how that breaks down is 50 million is now in the city of Omaha's bank account. The city council will vote on that on Tuesday to start distributing that quickly.
Whoa. Because I see this number on this thing. It says 84.7.
84.7 is being reallocated from the state's program.
Okay, when I hear reallocation, that scares me. Can you walk me through what happened and why are we reallocating?
Yep. When it became clear that we were not going to meet the Treasury thresholds for the first round of ERA1, which I believe was 65% spent by September of 2021, and hopefully someone behind me can correct me if I'm wrong, we were asked to submit an improvement plan as to how to more efficiently distribute those funds. in lieu of giving it back to Treasury. So could we figure out a way to more efficiently to get money to the Nebraskans who needed it? And what the state decided to do was to take 84.7 million of that 158 million and transfer it to the jurisdictions who are out of money. So Omaha has spent all of its ERA 1 and ERA 2 at this point to the tune of, I think, $39 million since April 2021. So we're going to have 50 million to redistribute or to continue to process applications because there's been a pause on them for the last 2 weeks.
When did Omaha run out of money?
I think we ran out of ERA 1 and most of ERA 2 by probably November 2021.
And at that time, the state had plenty of dollars and didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, but they had, to their credit, they were already in this process of figuring out what the need was and contacting the other ERA jurisdictions and figuring out what their projected need was going to be through September 2022.
So this transfer of 84.7, that's federal dollars being transferred to those jurisdictions?
Mm-hmm.
So by the definition of transferring 84 million to those jurisdictions to disperse, isn't that like a prima facie case that there's still a need in those jurisdictions?
I am not a lawyer, and I hope someone behind me can answer that question for you. I only play one on
Otherwise,
TV.
we would have gave them. Otherwise we would have gave the money back, right? I mean, at
Right.
the end of the day,
That is what would have happened, and that Treasury would have taken that money back and reallocated it to other emergency rental assistance programs because this money is not going to anything else except for other emergency rental assistance programs. So the idea being that they would transfer the money to places that needed those funds. And if that's not in the state of Nebraska, it would have gone to a program in Des Moines or I can't name other cities at this point.
right. So let me just get this right. We're going to pay them up to $8 million to come up with the program. We got sent basically a letter or something from the Treasury saying you need to have a needs improvement because you're not going to meet your threshold. And now their idea was to reallocate it to the city of Omaha, who they also have a contract with to manage ARPA funds. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know the details of, I know the city of Omaha has contracted with Deloitte to manage their ARPA funds, and I would not be able to tell you with any degree of certainty if that includes the management of Omaha's ERA distribution, since they have subcontracted to the metro area continuum of care for the homeless.
And this is not more of a statement. So we paid them up to $8 million to get on a needs improvement plan to transfer money to Omaha. But give me $2 million. I could figure this out a lot faster. Okay. Anyway, so the last question I have is pretty broad and pretty simple. What happens if we don't apply?
This money will go to ERA programs in other states who need it. It'll go to other jurisdictions. It will not remain in Nebraska because, like for instance, Omaha, Lincoln, Lancaster, and Douglas would not be able to be reallocated the money because it never came to us in the first place. So it would go to, I'm just going to pick on Des Moines, I guess. Des Moines, Council Bluffs, other regional Midwestern cities, or really anywhere in the country that needs emergency rental assistance and utilities.
There were two young kids sitting over there, and I'm going to say this, they're not sitting here, I don't know where Paul went, but for anybody who doesn't believe one person can make a difference,
Oh, no, don't do it.
this young lady right here has been contacting pretty much many people on this committee and has raised it to a level of where we're having a hearing. So one person can make a difference. Thank you for all your help.
I was really just talking to Senator Arch about vacationing in Mexico.
That's right.
That's been our main topic.
I've got one other question.
Senator Arch.
Thank you.
It's not about
And-
Mexico, right?
It's not about Mexico. This question maybe somebody behind you can answer this.
Mhm.
Do we have information on timing of these applications? In other words, did we see a rush of applications early and now it has declined? Has it been flat? Has it?
So when it started, it was a rough process. I think I was checking my data from the last couple months. And I think by maybe July or August, we had spent only 4 million. So in the last couple months, there's been an increase. In the last week and a half or 2 weeks, we've distributed another $1 million. So it has increased the amount. I will tell you that when I ran the data for each legislative district 2 weeks ago, every single legislative district has seen an increase when I checked again yesterday and updated the numbers. And some of them have been fairly significant increases. And one, there was one county that just got one application in, but that one application went to make sure a person stayed in their homes and a landlord could pay their mortgage. So it's, it all matters.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next, these two in the front, if you're going to testify, kind of move to the front so we can kind of keep it moving. Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee, and thank you for the drive to come down here.
Thank you.
How many testifiers do we have here? Okay, thank you. Dave, will you let him go next? Because they got to get back on the road. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chairman Wayne and Senators of the Urban Affairs Committee. I'm Karen Rathke, Karenrathke, and serve as President of the Heartland United Way in Grand Island, Nebraska. I'm here to speak in support for Amendment 1737 to LB 446. The Emergency Rental Assistance Funds for our area is absolutely necessary to provide people in need of rental and utility assistance a short-term fix to stabilize housing. A letter of support signed by our Board of Directors has been provided to you. So the Heartland United Way is a local community impact and fundraising organization with a mission to improve lives and create possibilities for people in Hall, Hamilton, Howard, and Merritt counties. With our mission in mind, the Heartland United Way began providing direct short-term financial assistance to help struggling people get their lives back on track and become self-supporting. The families we serve are working families living in a fragile balance of paycheck to paycheck and struggling with the cost burden of affordable housing. Their life problems escalate when a family experiences a disruption, illness, injury, loss of hours, loss of job. Rental and utility assistance is just one of the many ways local trusted providers can assist to stabilize housing during this disruption. The second round of ERA funds would benefit thousands of Nebraska families by truly providing them a lifeline as they continue to navigate their way through the pandemic and in this time of high inflation. At a local level, especially in the rural area or balance of state, there are very limited resources to assist people with short-term assistance, so we could desperately use these dollars to help people. The need for ERA funds, which is great, should not be measured by use of the cumbersome online ERA application portal, which one of our landlords will speak to next, and his reasons for the underutilization. Throughout the pandemic, our resources have disproportionately shrunk, while the need for resources have increased. To illustrate, in 2020, we assisted 664 households with $429,000, meeting 80% of the need. In 2021, 529 households, totaling $217,000, meeting 40% of the need. And in the first 5 weeks of 2022, we averaged 5 to 8 applications a day and have assisted $38,000, but have left unmet need of $17,228 because we do not have the dollars. About 50% of the applications are from people who have never applied for assistance in the past. Across the state, whether you're a United Way, a community action agency, a homeless shelter, or a domestic violence shelter, or numerous other providers, there's 120 million reasons to apply for these funds and trust in the dedicated service providers to do the right thing in meeting the need that's here. So we are strongly advocating for the Amendment 1737 and also a reconsideration on not using the state portal system, but trusting local people, boots on the ground, who then can provide support services, refer people to food, mental, medical, other kind of housing stability programs, education programs, other opportunities. And so we just ask that consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions because I was kind of biting my tongue on some of those questions you had, just to represent the balance of state, because we have no dollars. We have no ERA funds. The only way people can access in the whole balance of state any of these ERA 1 funds are through this portal, and it takes hours for people to go through.
Well, we'll get you. Well, I'm sure somebody's going to
Yes.
answer that question.
Yes, there you go.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Hunt.
Thank you. I have a question for you, but do you want to just finish that thought about the portal?
Well, I was just going to say that we assist a lot of people to navigate that portal, as would Andy would attest. And we have no dollars to even provide that assistance to help them do this 1 to 2.5 hour long process, because there's so many documents that you have to upload, and the landlords have to participate. And if they don't, then the checks go directly to the tenant, which is kind of an interesting process in and of itself. But the original first dollars that came out during the COVID pandemic were CARES dollars, and they were distributed to a lot of the nonprofits who were doing this work. They got them out quickly. We spent every one of them, and they, did a lot of really great things.
And we didn't need a portal to.
We
to get
didn't
those
need an
funds.
$8 million contract to do the work that we're doing. I mean, $8 million for all the nonprofits of the balance of the state would have been an amazing investment.
So we have this demonstrated need by the number of people trying to use the portal, but we haven't spent all of the funds. Can you speak to why that is?
Not without my blood pressure going up. The only resources that we have when they looked at redistributing or an improvement plan, they never once came to any of our providers that were doing the work and needed these funds. The conversations, happened at a different level than at the local level. And so we are really in a famine. We have $9,000 in local dollars to assist, and we run out the third day of the month. We do have some local CDBG dollars, so it has a lot of the other regular federal, guidelines and reporting, and we do all of that. We ask for pay stubs. We ask for a COVID test, just because our dollars are so limited. We want to make sure we're doing the right things with those dollars. And so these dollars really are a lifeline to Nebraskans. And in a more variant, with the contingency of this Omicron variant has had more people become sick, more children miss school and have to stay home. So a lot of less hours working, and they're all coming to us saying, we don't have the money for rent. We don't have the money for food, for this car repair, whatever it might be, because they unfortunately live paycheck to paycheck. And those are the people we need to help.
Well,
And it's hard.
One thing we've heard from the governor is that we have resources from ERA that haven't even been allocated yet. And do you think that, are you saying that like some of the reason for that is that people aren't getting through the portal for you to allocate those funds, or what is the?
Well, there's those funds, there's funds left in the portal from my understanding, but there is still 40 million, maybe 32. So there's a pot of money
Okay.
that have not been allocated that have to be spent, to my understanding, by the end of September. And we would desperately appreciate having some of those resources. And on behalf of the people that need this, and they're not, by trusting local providers, we know we have relationships with the landlords, with the utility companies. We know those dollars are going directly there. We see the eviction notice. We see the disconnect notice. There's, I wouldn't say zero chance of fraud, but we vet it as closely as we possibly can. And I'm sure all the other providers do the same. But we didn't have the chance with these ERA funds like Lincoln and Omaha did. And it's burning a lot of service providers out, myself included. I take applications. That's not, and it's just because there's a need. And every time you have to turn somebody no, and they have kids in front of you,
Yeah.
can't do it.
Thank you, Ms. Rathke.
Any other questions from the committee? Well, I thank you for your work, and I thank you for driving all the way up here. You have a senator who made sure you were going to be testifying first so you can get back on the road. So
Yes,
Thank
well,
you.
I'm happy to be here. Happy to have one of our landlords to speak to the portal system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next proponent. Thank you, Dave. Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee.
Thank you for having me. My name is Andy Marsh, ANDYMARSH. I own and operate Keystone Properties. We're in Grand Island, own roughly just shy of 600 properties between Hastings and Grand Island. I'm here to speak about the ERA process that we went through and experienced. Some may want to, and my properties fall in the balance of the state that we refer to. So some of that 84.7 million, my understanding, got reallocated from my area, balance of state, to other areas. I started in early on in 2020 with the portal, and that's since I'm in balance of state, we are required to use the portal. The portal at that point was cumbersome, time-consuming, and assumed certain criteria. It assumed that my tenant had a working cell phone. It assumed they had a laptop or internet connection or lights and electricity on at their apartment to complete. They assumed that they had transportation to go to a local library to complete the portal. Those are some of the things that we ran on early on with the portal. And I just printed off this morning. I've still got 2 pages of applications out there that I'm having to work through appeal process or are in review and trying to get answers. Our application process has been told is different from Omaha Lincoln. Our funding pools are different from the Omaha and the Lincoln area. Early on, what Mrs. Rathke spoke about was the COVID funds that were directed to local and entrusted agencies within our region that were divvied up, worked well. It rehoused and kept people from becoming homeless. But with the portal situation, I've got a couple of examples as to why the system has failed. I reallocated my staff, bought them laptops to go out and knock on doors and help these tenants through this process to make sure that they could stay homeless or not become homeless, to get the portal, the applications processed. Most recently, honestly, because I know I'm running out of time, but one case in point, we had one of my tenants who was deployed. When returning to the States, was promised a job. When returned, that job was eliminated due to COVID. She was out, unemployed. She's also within and serves the Nebraska Guard. Went to her house, helped her get applied, and was denied because the state recognized her National Guard pay, which was minimal, as a disqualifier. And I had to work through her and I worked through the portal system for 6 months to get her rent, and finally did. But the first application that I went through and submitted in January.
We're trying to keep time restrictions, but I'll ask the first question. Can you finish your story?
The first application submitted was early in, right when the portal came out. I didn't receive a first check for assistance until May. It was a 5 to 6 month waiting period.
For one person.
That was the first application.
What was the time gap you felt, or on average, the time gap between application, appeal, and final? And then what happens to those individuals who you rented to? Did you eat that cost? That's the other part.
I think there's multiple answers there, Senator Wayne. Number one, me, my staff, and tenants had to call in to babysit the application. There was never follow-up. There was never a call back, an email from the company administrating the system. Sometimes they were as little as, hey, you were missing a photo of your ID. It didn't come through clearly. Well, we didn't know that. That would have sped up. We waited 45 days to call in and sit on hold for 3 hours to find out that was what we were waiting for. So then it started the process over. It was another 45 days. Sometimes those cases then, your pay stub didn't come through clearly. Minute details that delayed the process. Others were just, some mistypes, email mistypes, okay? Human error factors. The process that we started early in January of 2020, I don't know the timing. My understanding was we were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, making multiple calls. We were getting sent to a call center in Texas. People in the call center in Texas couldn't give us answers. Finally, Mrs. Rathke, I served on her board. At some point and I served on our homeless shelter board for 6 years in Grand Island as well. So I'm close to this. I am humanistic and I want to keep people housed. I was able to get a contact at NIFA. And that's honestly what probably set me aside from any other landlord in the balance of the state, was I made that connection and was able to email and communicate with that individual directly. It felt as though I was getting preferential treatment, but I was going to use it to make sure I was not putting people on the street. They were able to manipulate behind the scenes to expedite some systems. So
Any
it's been
questions
cumbersome.
from the committee? Senator Breeze.
Thank you, Chairman Wayne. Thank you, sir, coming here today and testifying. What percent of your tenants access ERA funds or rely on them?
I would say right now, this is a close estimate, probably 12%.
Still quite a few people.
Yes, I've got applications that I met with yesterday to help get applied. We applied for one and got applied here about 27 days ago, and I got the check in the mail yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
Just.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Next proponent. Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee.
Thank you very much. Chairperson Wayne, members of the committee, my name is Dave Pantos, DAVE-PANTOS. I'm testifying in support of AM 1737 in my capacity as a volunteer attorney with the Nebraska Tenant Assistance Project, or TAP, in Douglas County. I've been a member of the Nebraska State Bar since 2006. I've been a lawyer for 25 years total, and I've volunteered with TAP since last summer. Working with tenants facing eviction and homelessness every week in courtroom 20 in Douglas County's county court. TAP brings together a nonpartisan group of volunteer attorneys and other volunteers in the community to stem the onslaught of eviction filings since the end of the CDC eviction moratorium in August of 2021. I'll be as straight as I can be. Nebraska residents need these funds considered by AM 1737 to prevent a tsunami of homelessness in our communities. Since the CDC eviction moratorium ended, the availability of ERAP funds has been the primary tool we volunteer attorneys have had at our disposal to prevent our clients from being evicted. The contrast is stark. When a tenant has no representation and no access to these funds, their eviction hearing will usually last about 60 seconds. And the next step for them is a sheriff's deputy removing their belongings from their home. When volunteer attorneys are available, as well as ERAP funds, evictions are prevented over 90% of the time. It's true. The ERAP funds have allowed me, a volunteer attorney with limited prior experience in landlord-tenant law, to successfully negotiate with landlord attorneys and property managers just a few extra weeks of time with the expectation of that funds transfer from ERAP. Since August, I've prevented approximately 50 evictions this way. If Nebraska prematurely ran out of these funds due to the failure to apply for them, I, as a volunteer attorney, will similarly run out of arguments to keep my clients housed. ERAP funds can benefit tenants, the community, but also landlords. These funds keep the rent paid so that landlords can count on being able to pay their bills too. I applaud Senator Hansen for sponsoring this legislation, and I urge this committee to pass it. Let's keep these landlords paid and keep these tenants housed. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? On average, what are you seeing on Thursdays? Sometimes other days in the courthouse, but on average, how many evictions are you seeing due to lack of payment?
So these are the 7-day notices. We're getting to the point of like 60 or 70 eviction cases per day, 4 days a week in Douglas County. It's going up. Yeah, as soon as that eviction moratorium ended,
Right.
exponential.
All right, I usually see you at the courthouse at the line. So yeah, any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Next proponent. Welcome to your urban affair.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon. My name is Alan Diggar, A-L-A-N-D-U-G-G-E-R. I'm a student attorney for the Civil Clinic at Nebraska Law. I am testifying and speaking on behalf of AM1737 in my personal capacity as a student of the law and housing advocate. I've been volunteering in the Lancaster County Tenant Assistance Project daily since the summer of 2020, right at the height of the first wave of the pandemic. I'm probably one of the few people who have seen how eviction court proceedings have evolved over the course of TAP's existence. In my short legal career, I have helped countless families avoid eviction. And I can tell you, the most effective tool we've ever had to keep families housed is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. It is the only thing that has held back a storm of evictions in Lincoln, where hundreds are being filed every month. The ability to offer rental assistance money to landlords has utterly changed eviction court in Lancaster County. Now, tenants are routinely able to remain in their homes and repair their relationships with their landlords, as opposed to being evicted immediately and often forced into homelessness. It has been a sea change in the eviction realm and the positive outcomes we regularly achieve. The most common scenario for us is a win-win for both parties rather than a contentious hearing. That's incredible when you consider how litigation usually goes. And I think all Nebraskans should have this opportunity, not just here in Lancaster or Douglas counties, where ERA funds are being allocated separately. The governor's refusal to accept these funds denies the possibility of similar outcomes to greater Nebraska families and landlords for no coherent reason. As other testifiers have stated, in greater Nebraska, there's far less money and far more barriers to access here. And that's not equitable. It's a misnomer that there's no need for these funds, or Nebraskans need to get back to work. Our unemployment rate here is 1.7%. We don't have any problems with Nebraskans being unwilling to get back to work. So the most common tenant we see in Lancaster County is someone just 1 month behind, having fallen behind long ago due to illness or job loss. The tenants are usually employed when they come to us. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and that means they never catch up, and they never will without help. The sword of Damocles rental of eviction sits dangling over their heads until their landlord files suit. Being behind on rent means eviction is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. These are working families that need help recovering from an ongoing pandemic. It is senseless and ruinous to deny Nebraskans this aid. I cannot think of one good reason why we'd refuse this tool to divert evictions that would keep families housed and allow landlords to pay their bills. I ask this committee to signal support for accepting these funds on behalf of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Next proponent. Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Wayne and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Sarah Meadows, S-A-R-A-M-E-A-D-O-W-S, and I am the Director of the Homeless Prevention and Diversion at Heartland Family Service in Omaha, Nebraska. Through our homeless prevention and diversion programs, we work with individuals and families who are experiencing a housing crisis and will soon face eviction and homelessness if not for supportive services or financial assistance. During the past 20 years, I've worked with individuals and families who live near or under the federal poverty line in both Omaha and Lincoln. I've served on the Governor's Commission on Housing and Homelessness and the Vice Chair of the Lincoln Homeless Coalition. Through these experiences, I have seen how cuts in funding negatively affect those in need by removing essential services. Today, I'm here in support of AM 1737, a call to action opposing Nebraska governor's decision not to accept additional state emergency rental assistance, and would like to thank Senator Hansen for bringing forth this amendment. Our failure to apply for ERA2 will directly impact communities across Nebraska. If the deadline passes without us accepting these funds, we will lose 3 years' worth of assistance. Community organizations providing financial assistance to struggling Nebraskans will lose a critical line of funding and be forced to rely on extremely limited funding. The current statewide ERA program ends September 30th of this year, and a valuable lifeline for renters, rental housing providers, and communities will be gone. Allowing this money to be allocated to another state would be irresponsible, unfair to Nebraskans, and could lead to catastrophic outcomes. Currently in Heartland Family Service, we have over 1,000 unanswered calls on our homeless prevention line and 500 unanswered calls on our homeless diversion line. Although dedicated staff work tirelessly to assist everyone who's looking for some hope, we cannot fully meet the current level of need, let alone the demands that the future will hold. Our community is in desperate need of these ERA funds, and the government is offering the citizens of Nebraska. Also, with the eviction moratorium coming to an end, we have just begun to see an increase in requests for financial assistance. We have not yet witnessed the lasting effects of COVID-19 on many Nebraskans. If we do not apply for these funds now, we'll see an influx of adults and children seeking assistance through our shelter providers who are currently overwhelmed and already serving to their maximum capacity. The funds we're requesting today can significantly reduce the number of children and adults, some of the most vulnerable Nebraskans, from entering homelessness. The money that AM 1737 will allow us to receive will keep families and individuals housed, reduce the trauma that so many have experienced through this global pandemic, and help service providers increase our client stability and self-sufficiency. We urgently seek legislative support to require the state to apply for these ERA funds and urge you to vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Next proponent. Welcome to your Urban Affairs. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Jamal, Mahmed. My last name is Jimle. I'm represented by East African Development Association Nebraska. It's a non-profit located in Omaha, Nebraska. Basically, the community we serve mostly are refugees from East African countries. I would like to support for 1737 because era funding. A lot of my community are worried about becoming homeless if state do not accept this funding, because the people we represent mostly are single mothers, and some of them they are feeling that they will be becoming homeless because some of this we don't manage for era funding, but we basically support families for application process to get approval. We submit a different agencies located in Omaha, but we have a small program called HBS. That's a homeless prevention program that we support these families. So I would like to support for this 1737. If it's still not accepted, I'm sure a lot of families from my community will face a challenge for becoming homeless because they are very vulnerable people. Due to their body language, they don't speak English, and they speak in their own language, and they have some of them. They worry about if they become homeless, who can be supported because they don't have extended families in Nebraska. They're just starting for new American people. They just starting new life in Nebraska, state Nebraska. So they don't have extended families. So I would like the state to support this program, so my people will get some support from this program, so they can still have their own house or their apartment, so they continue life. So basically, that's why I'm here today. Thank you so much for you doing this, supporting this thing. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? I still owe you an email and a call, so we'll get in contact.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next proponent.
Good afternoon, Senator Wayne and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Karen Bell Dancy, KarenBell-DANCY, and I am the Executive Director of the YWCA of Lincoln. The mission of the YWCA is the elimination of racism and the empowerment of women and the promotion of peace, justice, and dignity for all. We've been in this Lincoln community. I know we've heard so much about Omaha this morning, but with Lincoln, we've been here over 135 years. We are part of a national network that serves over 200 million individuals in the U.S. nationwide. I am here today in support of 1737. I also want to express my gratitude to Senator Hansen for introducing this very important amendment. Housing is a basic human right, but there are thousands of families right here in our state, including here in Lincoln, that struggle to pay rent along with other basic needs. We see these families coming into the YWCA daily. 40% of American families report that they face an unexpected expense of $400 or more if they face one of $400 or more, like a breakdown in a car or a medical emergency. They would be unable to pay their bills. That is especially true for those who participate in our YWCA programs. When a family receives an eviction notice, it sets off a downward spiral that becomes harder and harder for them to recover from. An eviction record threatens the family's ability to fund future housing. It causes them to lose possessions and damages their credit. The impacts to an individual's mental health, children's education, and the threat of homelessness are very real. Throughout the pandemic, many individuals who participate in our programs have applied for and received emergency rental assistance funds from the city of Lincoln. Many more are eligible for assistance but have not yet applied. When emergency rental assistance is paid out, landlords receive a family's back rent owed to them and then several months of future rent. This provides the tenants with time to get back on their feet and avoid eviction. Officials at the city of Lincoln predict that given the amount of need in our community, their remaining rental assistance funds will only last through the end of the year. In the interest of time, I would just like to sum up that we were one of the organizations that received some of the CARES funding. We applied for and we received $70,000. I wish we had applied for more. That money was immediately allocated out to support families within 5 months. The need continues to come to our door. We don't have those funds. I do wish that we would apply for the additional funds and those funds come back into the nonprofits for us to get those out to the citizens that need it here in our community.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Can you, this is an unfair question. Can you kind of demonstrate, like right now, the number of calls or how many people you're hearing? Just the estimated, I hear from Omaha kind of what the need is. But
yes, through our community and family engagement, we receive about 40 requests a month, and it varies. Sometimes there's like at least 10 a week, and it spans the gamut with housing, with basic needs. It's deodorant, it's toothpaste, it's mileage assistance, it's all those things.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions for the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Next proponent.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Wayne and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Tina Rockenbach, TINAROCKENBACH, and I'm the Executive Director for Community Action of Nebraska. We are the State Association of Community Action, representing all 9 of community action agencies in Nebraska, serving all 93 counties. I'm here to testify in support of Amendment 1737 as it relates to emergency rental assistance. Since the inception of community action in the 60s, we've been the expert network working to assist individuals and families out of the effects of the cycle of poverty. I understand that our unemployment rate is low and is used for the basis of making some of these financial decisions. However, that is not the only factor we should be gauging need by. I agree our economy is showing a rebound and we're slowly moving towards normalcy. However, we have a ways to go, and if we limit additional funds to help Nebraskans get caught up on their rent and utility balances, we're only willingly feeding that cycle of poverty in a pandemic environment. If you look at the handout I've provided with my testimony, this is a very quick snapshot of community actions efforts to help citizens with rent and utilities. These totals are by agency for approximately the last 6 months, and they represent all of our sources of revenue, including CARES money and assistance that are separate and above and beyond any state level ARPA emergency rental assistance that would be available through the portal process. These numbers also do not include the number of clients our agencies have assisted in completing those applications for that state level emergency rental assistance through the portal. You can see by these astronomical numbers how the load on our agencies will increase this second round. And I might also note that while we have CARES money right now, the end of September, that goes away. And that's really what's helping us keep some of these people in their homes. I surveyed all of our agencies, and you can see by pie charts on the bottom, 6 out of 9 of the agencies right now are reporting an increase in requests for rent and utilities. And among this influx, 7 of the 9 agencies are reporting that the steady influx of requests is higher than pre-COVID, so higher than the norm. A lot of what we're hearing from our agencies is the majority of these families are working or getting back to work. However, their balances are 4 to 6 months in arrears. And with the portal system, it, as we've already heard, is a cumbersome process, but it's also a long approval process. So some of our agencies are scrambling to try to help with what we can, because by the time they're getting an approval back through that process, through that portal, it's too late. They're already getting eviction notices, things like that. Along with that, our agency, everything is eligibility by the federal poverty level. Our complications and our struggles, challenges have been complicated by the federal poverty level being back down in Nebraska to 125%. We're federally right now, temporarily, that is allowed per state to stay at 200. So just to kind of wrap up my thoughts, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and you have the rest of my testimony there.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee.
Hi, thank you. My name is Megan McCall. It's Megan, last name spelled Mccaull. I am a single mom of 3 kids, 2 of them with disabilities, and 1 is going to the Shriners to see if he needs further evaluation. I have been heavily affected by the pandemic. My children go to school and daycare, and sorry, when their daycare shuts down for 2 weeks, I take my kids out, both of them, because it'd be one room. Another room, as soon as we get back, that room gets shut down because they were exposed to COVID. So that's 1 month of me not being able to work. So therefore, I've lost several jobs during this pandemic. And right now, I'm sorry, because I just got a letter on my door saying that I have 30 days to come up with my rent or I'm evicted. So it's kind of been a stressful day. So because I have children with disabilities, I do have to miss work a lot. I think this is going to be a really good thing for especially families like me, who is really trying to provide for their families, and just, I need to live. I need to live. I do work. I love to work. If I could, I can work all the time and just hope that my kids are happy and healthy, but I don't have that option. I have a special heart for kids. I was a daycare teacher for a long time, and I've seen kids that have struggled, lived in cars. I give them rides to the mission when I see them walking down the road. So it is hard. Being a parent, especially during a pandemic, is really, really hard and very frustrating. And I just really hope that we can have the extra 3 years so we can come back from this, because I'm still struggling. I've had COVID a couple of different times. My children had it once. My son has been pulled out of school, is now behind on his education. He has to go to speech therapy now because he missed so much of his speech therapy in school. He's also getting screened for autism just because I've noticed some things that are not quite right. He has ADHD, and then he requires so much doctors and medicals and stuff like that. And I miss work, and it's not ideal. And I take the bus too, because I lost my car after I lost my job, it got repoed. So now I spend about 5 to 6 hours on a bus transporting everybody. So I have an hour to myself to try to find a job because the Lincoln bus system is not really feasible for a single parent. And I try to apply for other help to get them to and from daycare or school. Also, and if I do have any extra money, I do get food assistance. And I have a gluten-free allergy. So is my son, we have celiac. So all the extra money that I have, if I run out of food stamps, has to go. And a box of macaroni and cheese for regular people is 99 cents. For me, it's $2.32.
I have to ask you to wrap up.
So again, I just really hope that we can make this work and help families, not just me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? See, Senator Hart.
I have no questions. I just wanted to thank you for coming to speak with us because in the legislature, we hear from a lot of organizations and nonprofits and lobbyists, and it's hard to get people in here during the workday to share their personal experiences. So I don't want you to leave without having that acknowledged. So thank you for that.
Thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem. You have a great day.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Next proponent.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wayne and committee. Thank you for allowing us to have testimonies today. Tanya Gifford with Executive Director of Lift Up Sarpy County. I come to you today as someone who was financially impacted by COVID and had to reach out for assistance, and as a community partner in helping so many other families with their needs. Lift Up Sarpy County is blessed to have almost 100 collaborative partners we get to work with daily to address those life challenges people face in Sarpy County. The flood of 2019 permanently took away about 300 homes from our families in Bellevue and damaged thousands more. What we didn't know was this would only be the preface to the story, and COVID would be the next chapters in what could be a horror story. Sarpy County is the fastest growing county in Nebraska and perceived to be economically independent and not in need of any financial assistance. Just 2 weeks ago, though, volunteers gathered to do a point-in-time count of the homeless population. Senators, just my report to them of the families that I knew about in Sarpy County was 13 families at a local hotel, all victims of evictions and or domestic violence. 3 families living out of their car in the Gretna Walmart, and 7 other families at the truck stop. By the end of the count, they had confirmed over 70 homeless individuals. Sarpy County, where everyone takes care of their own and money is no object, doesn't seem so true. Since the inception of ERAP, over $4.9 million has been allocated to families in Sarpy County. Lift Up Sarpy with our collaboratives have awarded out an additional $1.5 million. Our own county has only allocated $500,000 of their $38.6 million in ARPA funds through Sarpy County Human Services to address the needs. The rest is all grant funding and private donors. So it's no surprise that the governor doesn't understand the need because we are battling our own county on the extent of the need. ERAP, as of the end of January, had assisted 2,019 applicants since the inception in Sarpy County. Yet we as a collaborative answered 1,757 referrals just in January. So many applicants don't even know that ERAP is out there because the news channels and social media reference Douglas and Lancaster County assistance programs and not the remainder of the state. For those that do know about ERAP, many find the process frustrating or have technical challenges that cause them to just give up and call us. These calls for help are recently being turned down unless they have a 7-day letter or an actual eviction court date due to the depleting access to funds. Senators, if we do not get the second round of ERAP, we in Sarpy County will not be able to prevent thousands of families from eviction and possibly homelessness. The second round allows for what Aaron had talked about earlier is case management and funding for low-income housing projects. The first round didn't allow any flexibility in those areas. It's kind of like helping an addict. We send them to treatment and we expect once they leave treatment that they're going to automatically be better. That's not the case. We can't put a Band-Aid on these families and just make a payment and expect that everything's going to be better. Let's take this second round of ERAP and invest in the future. Invest in getting families sustainable instead of just putting a Band-Aid on the problem that's not going away anytime
I'm
soon.
gonna need you to wrap up.
I'm asking you today to turn this horror story into a feel-good success story. Let the chapters include stories about families staying in their homes, caseworkers helping out and closing files, and getting this low-income housing crisis taken care of. Thank you.
Any questions? Senator Lowe.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
For the transcribers, could you spell your name, please?
Absolutely. Sorry about that. TANYAGIFFORD. Thank you, Senator Lowe.
You could have sent me a note, Angelita. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wayne.
Both me and Trevor missed it. Sorry. Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Wayne. Thank you, Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Scott Mertz, SCOTTMERTZ. I am the director of Legal Aid in Nebraska's Housing Justice Project, and I have extensive experience representing low-income tenants over nearly 13 years. I've experienced both as an individual practicing attorney and collectively with my entire Housing Justice Project team representing low-income tenants all across the state. I thank you for the opportunity to appear today in support of Amendment 1737. And I also want to specifically thank Senator Hansen for introducing this amendment and inviting Legal Aid in Nebraska to testify today. Included in the material is a bit of background of our organization, which again is the only statewide provider of free legal service for low-income Nebraskans. One of our priorities is housing, and our primary goal at the Housing Justice Project is to ensure that all Nebraskans are able to preserve quality, affordable housing. That's what we strive for. We strive to provide quality defense and eviction actions all across the state. But legal representation alone is often inadequate to prevent an entire family from becoming homeless. Households ultimately do need rent money in order to be housing secure. That's why all of our clients at Legal Aid Nebraska have benefited from this emergency rental assistance program. Without the money to pay not just accrued rent, but also accrued late fees that can really pile up and add to the balance when you do, our attorneys may be able to delay eviction, make arrangements to voluntarily move out at a later date, but there is no long-term solution to housing insecurity without this financial component. With the availability of ERA funds, our attorneys are able to combine the legal representation with the financial aid in order to keep families in their homes permanently. We have seen this work. We see this work every single day. We have helped families delay eviction proceedings so that they can then access the rental assistance necessary to get caught up. As testifiers have already accounted for, the process can take time. With the combination of getting that time in court, people can get connected to this money, and this money can actually keep people housed and prevent the eviction entirely. There is need for this money, and the need is going to continue so long as there are low-income renters that suffer any manner of financial hardship in these coming years. If there were no need, we would not see eviction numbers continue to rise all across the state, not just in Douglas County or Lancaster County. And while it is unfortunate that the eviction numbers are increasing, there is no doubt in my mind that those numbers would be far higher than they are at their current levels if there was no emergency rental assistance funding on the ground. That money has done tremendous work to keep the numbers low, keep them manageable to the extent that people can connect with attorneys and attorneys can actually provide adequate representation and connect people to the ERA funds. So I do not wish to be duplicative of testimony that's come before, but we at Legal Aid Nebraska see the need because we hear from people all across the state, not just in Omaha or Lincoln, and we have connected people to this assistance program, and it has benefited people demonstrably. So with that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Senator
Chairman
Breeze.
Wayne, thank you for your testimony here today. You're on one side of the eviction process. Any ballpark guesses or estimate as to what the eviction process might cost a landlord in legal fees?
Yeah, ballpark. Usually you're paying an attorney $300. Sometimes that will include, sometimes not, the actual filing fee that goes with it. Sometimes the service cost as well goes with it. So you're talking in a range between $300 and $500. Again, if the landlords, who again can start the application process for ER funds, do that prior to an eviction process, and we have heard testimony today from one representing the landlords, they can save that money too by ensuring that they're still getting caught up and avoiding the financial cost that they're incurring by going to eviction court.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you for being
Thank
here today. Next proponent. How many more proponents do we have left? How many opponents? Anybody testifying in the neutral capacity? Okay. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Pospisil, Carolyn Pospisil. I'm the Executive Director for Housing Foundation for Sarpy County and Bellevue Housing Authority. First and foremost, we want to thank this committee for your ongoing support of housing stability in Nebraska. This committee passed LB 446 to general file with unanimous vote. We are here today to request that support continue by amending the bill to include AM1737 to require the state to apply for available ERAP funding. We continue to receive phone calls daily from individuals who have been impacted by COVID. Since 2020 CARES Act dollars, our agency has operated our rental assistance program with a staff of 2. Since March of 2021, when the current ERAP funding process began, we have continued to process and as of now have done $376,281 in housing and utility assistance through philanthropic funding. While ERAP funding through the state program has been available, the process is slower than many property owners are willing to wait for the assistance. We have been able to bridge that gap by aiding renters who have eviction notices and would otherwise lose their housing. We've assisted many renters that have never had to ask for assistance before. COVID doesn't have any income targets. We have assisted rents as high as $2,400 a month. That isn't just low-income households that need assistance. For the first day we receive the application or referral, it takes us 7 to 10 days to process the paperwork and submit a check to the property owner. When we receive an application referral, we speak with the tenant, all tenants and all adults in the household, and the landlord. Everyone today has done a great job of telling you about ERAP funding is essential for stabilizing renters. Just as important, ERAP funding is stabilizing rental property owners. When you have rental property, you plan for a few months of income loss into your financial well-being. Very few property owners are prepared for renters to not be able to pay their rent for months. Without assistance provided by the property owner on behalf of the tenant, many owners face losing their income property. In the last year, we have provided such income reimbursement to 144 property owners in Sarpy County. Without this assistance, many of them would not continue to be landlords. These business owners have had to raise current rents to try and recover from past income losses. This is choking renters that are already struggling to afford to stay in Sarpy. In 2019, we championed a housing study for the Sarpy County to determine housing needs across of all housing types and income levels. It was determined that our area needed more than 2,500 units of rental housing in a 5-year time frame. COVID construction delays and steeply increased construction costs slowed down that progress. We cannot afford to lose any more housing affordability. Not in my notes, but 2 things that have come up in questions. The question was asked in references were made to nonprofits and how they were able to process CARES Act funds. My staff of 3 people at the time was able to process $900,000 in CARES Act funds in 4 months.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing that, thank you for being here today. Next proponent. Just so people know, at 1:30, other hearings start, so some of our senators will leave. This still will be transcribed. They will review the transcript or the online video. So, but this room will be available. We'll finish this hearing, but just so you know, if senators leave, it isn't that they don't care about the topic. They have to go to their other committees. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, committee members and staff. Wayne Mortensen, WayneMortensen. I'm the CEO of NeighborWorks Lincoln, here to speak on behalf of that organization and our board of directors. I learned this morning that I also share a birthday with Senator Hansen. I want to thank Senator Matt Hansen for introducing this amendment for this critical purpose. We've spent for 35 years, we've been almost predominantly focused on helping people achieve the dream of first-time homeownership. But I'm here today to represent and advocate for renters across the state because we've seen the chaos that this pandemic has had in the housing market. Stable and affordable housing, I'll try to focus on the point of my written comments that hasn't been addressed yet. Stable and affordable housing is fundamental to household and family health. It is a harbinger of success, and its inverse has deleterious effects on the social, physical, and economic health of families and children. Homelessness and housing insecurity for children, for example, are forced to frequently change schools, and with each change, performance suffers and academic loss occurs. A better idea of homelessness and housing insecurity is not necessarily looking at the housing, the homeless shelters or the lines at Matt Talbot, because in Lincoln, homelessness looks like couch surfing amongst various family, friends, and coworkers. It looks like sleeping in your car in a public parking lot. And as you can imagine, the effects of that on children are severe. The same is true for the mental and physical health of adults, where housing insecurity exacerbates pre-existing conditions and leads to hypertension and depression. The costs of managing the outcomes of all of that, healthcare, drug abuse, homeless shelters, food pantries, social workers and law enforcement personnel, and public school supports are exponentially higher than the provision of rental and utility assistance to get ahead of these problems upstream in the first place. We're here as a housing agency that supports home ownership because we've seen that the more desperate renters become, the more difficult it is for us to have a market that works, a housing market that works. The more desperate someone is to get into housing, the worse condition of housing they're willing to accept. And that doesn't serve anybody in Lincoln well. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. My name is Casey Ogle, Kasey-Ogle. I'm a staff attorney at Nebraska Appleseed. Nebraska Appleseed is a nonprofit organization that fights for justice and opportunity for all Nebraskans. I think we've heard a lot so far today about the continued need for emergency rental assistance, so I don't want to sort of belabor that point, except to say that it's very clear that there is additional need for this emergency rental assistance, and it can be used over a longer period of time for an additional 3.5 years, whereas current funds will expire at the end of September. What I would like to do is try to address some of the questions that the committee had earlier about documentation requirements and the flexibilities that the federal government and the Treasury Department allows with regard to the application for emergency rental assistance. So there's been some question about why hasn't ERA1 funds, why haven't they been distributed more widely across the state? And one of the reasons is because of the difficulty of the application, as you've heard today, but just to talk a little bit more in detail about what that looks like. There are generally like 3 things that need to be shown in an application for emergency rental assistance. You need to show that there's some sort of need due directly or indirectly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. You need to show that you're at risk of homelessness or housing insecurity, and that your household income is generally at or below 80% of area median income. It's a little different between ERA1 and ERA2, but if that's the guideline that you use for ERA1, you're allowed to use that same guideline, 80% AMI, for ERA2. So the Treasury has really great and concise guidance on the sort of ways that you can prove these things. And with all of them, it tends to be self-attestation. So tenant can show that they have a need due directly or indirectly to COVID-19 with self-attestation. The Nebraska emergency rental assistance application instead requires a lot of documentation, like a verification of unemployment and receiving unemployment assistance, pay stubs to show a difference in income, a layoff letter. These are examples that are listed in the guidance that the Nebraska program has put out on their website. You can also show a risk of homelessness or housing insecurity with self-attestation. So these would be really simple. A tenant would say, I meet the income requirements. That's another one. You can also use a fact, the state of Nebraska could adopt fact-specific proxies specific to household income. And that would generally say an area has people living in a geographic area will meet the income requirements, generally meet the income requirements. So,
Thank you.
yes.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Breeze.
Thank you, Chairman Wayne. Thanks for your testimony. How do other states handle the application process and as far as self-attestation regarding risk of homelessness and
Yeah.
income? What do other states do?
A lot of other grantees will have adopted those self-attestation, allowing tenants to self-attest to those COVID impacts or income, things like that. We can see that in the Lincoln application, for example, as well.
But most states go that route.
I can't speak to all states, but I know that other states have gotten their emergency rental assistance out a lot more efficiently than we have. And generally, the problems that people are facing are the documentation requirements.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here. After this testimony, I'm gonna ask if Paul can go next, out of courtesy. His 2 grandkids are here and they're getting a little restless. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wayne and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Hannah Young, HANNAHYOUNG, and I am here with Nonprofit Association of the Midlands, or NAM. NAM is a nonprofit organization with over 725 members dedicated to strengthening the collective voice, leadership, and capacity of Nebraska, of nonprofit organizations, enriching the quality of community life in Nebraska and Western Iowa. We help nonprofits help their communities. There are over 13,000 nonprofits in our state, each trying to make a difference on their own. We bring them together so that each member can benefit from our collective strength. We are writing to show our support for AM1737. The COVID-19 public health crisis has made Nebraska families and communities even more vulnerable, with many people struggling to access food and housing. This is not a time to stop the support Nebraskans need. Rejecting the money in emergency rental assistance not only puts a burden on families, but also nonprofits who are stepping up to support the most vulnerable in our communities. In our last survey, 29% of those nonprofits surveyed said the effects of COVID-19 have been moderate and their organization needs additional financial support to overcome these difficulties and anticipates long-term impacts. The state of Nebraska taking $120 million that would otherwise be allocated to different states would help lessen the burden for nonprofits and allow them to direct their limited funds to other needs in the communities. Because of this, NAM is supportive of AM 1737, and we thank you for your time and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
This is gonna dwindle down to a committee of 1 real quick. We do appreciate all the testimony though, so. Welcome back, Paul.
Trying not to take too much time, but I put together.
Spell your name for the record.
Paul Feilman, F as in Frank, EILMANN. When I did mental health counseling, I got to see some impact of poverty on kids. I testified last week about the mental health impact of poverty, which is pretty extensive. I worked with a 6th grader back many years ago, and since then he's now working in Omaha, but he gave me permission to share his story because of the impact of homelessness in his life. It's pretty well laid out in this article. Mike Kelly, columnist, wrote this article about David Love a few years ago, and I pulled it up to share with you. He talks, when I first met him, he was in 6th grade, living with his mom. She had some health issues, mental health issues, and I worked with them and trying to help him with some school issues. After a while I was working with them, some complications came up and they ended up losing their home, and they ended up living in a van behind Family Fun Center. That's where I did my therapy for a while. I would go out there, the van wasn't running. I got help for them to get the van running. But he said, David is he's just so resilient. He told me all these funny things. He said, the best place in Omaha to be homeless is 72nd and Dodge, because you can just roam around all the different stores and nobody really notices you. But I finally helped him get the van running, and he ended up getting into a shelter with his mom. But the psychological impact of that homelessness phase of being in the shelter and living in fact, one of these pictures is where his van was many years ago. But since then, what I'm trying to get across is the impact of homelessness. You lose out on so much stuff that could be accomplished. And what he did with his life after this was he got through Creighton Prep and worked at Target, rode the bus from North Omaha, and applied to Harvard and got into Harvard and has since graduated and now working at LinkedIn and has a nice apartment and supporting his mom. But every time he keeps a family from going into homelessness, this is the kind of opportunities you offer our citizens, our youth, and the trauma of the impact of the homelessness is avoided. So that was my message today. And this is a really amazing story. His interview in there was really powerful. So
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Have fun at Revenue. Welcome to your urban affair. I wonder if it's just me. Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Cindy Maxwell Ostick, and that's CINDY-MAXWELL-OSTDIEK. And I'm a mom, a small business owner, and a taxpayer. And I'm here to ask you to pass AM1737 as quickly as possible. I'm a co-founder of the Nebraska Legislative Study Group, and I'm testifying on behalf of myself and the members of our group. When I learned that Governor Ricketts refused to apply for these emergency dollars for, they want to stay. To apply for these emergency dollars for renters and landlords, I was in disbelief. Since then, I've been even more surprised to learn the governor is implementing an emergency assistance fund for Nebraska homeowners. And as a member of the community, I can't fathom why our state would only serve some Nebraskans and not all. People of good conscience don't want their neighbors to lose their home. Aaron Feistinger with Together Inc. regularly invites community members to eviction court to learn about how this impacts our community. I attended this court on Wednesday morning and saw firsthand that there were evictions avoided, and I'd like to express gratitude to the TAP and legal aid volunteers there. As a candidate running for legislature, I can recommend that all of the current legislators accept her invite and attend those hearings. As a mother, I'm ashamed that our state would refuse emergency aid to help struggling families stay in their homes and keep a roof over their children's heads. It's hard for me to understand that our governor wouldn't realize some of the landlords are struggling too. As a small business owner, I'm outraged actually that Nebraska would forego $120 million to infuse in our state and for landlords to invest in their businesses. It's an investment in our communities. We have an extremely low unemployment rate right now, and employers need talented workers to grow their businesses. And housing issues like this impacts employees who are renters and their ability to find good work. Some employers check credit background as a condition of employment. As a federal taxpayer, I can't wrap my head around the reasoning of refusing federal dollars that Nebraskans pay in and will be sending to other states. I'm running out of time, so I'll finish, but I will say it's too bad the legislature has had to take this step. I thank you for using your authority for the good of the state, and I ask you to pass it immediately.
Any questions from Senator Rathke?
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Next proponent. Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee.
Thank you. I promise nothing I'm going to say is going to be redundant since I'm kind of pulling up the rear here. Good afternoon, Chairman Wayne and Senator Hunt. My name is Kristen Dupree. That's KRISTEN-DUPREE. I'm here in support of this amendment, and I'm going to take my time to address one of the reasons our governor rejected the rental assistance, the surging national debt and its alleged impact on inflation. Though we often hear sayings related to the level of national debt meant to scare voters into opposing policies that directly benefit them. Sayings like our grandchildren are going to pay for it, or the fact that a big scary debt clock even exists. But perhaps the most pernicious saying is the federal government should balance its budget just like a household. People who say this fail to recognize that the US government is the currency issuer and everyone else are currency users. That is a very important distinction. Currency issuers don't have the same constraints as currency users. These sayings are misguided and not a representation of how fiscal policy at the federal level of our government functions. Furthermore, they exploit the general public's lack of knowledge of these macroeconomic topics, and this leads to the continued flow of funds to the wealthy at the expense of people living in poverty and the middle class. The federal relief spending packages are not the driving force behind inflation. What people are usually talking about when they say this is that increased federal spending leads to an increase in aggregate demand. And that means more people have more money to spend, which results in too many dollars chasing too few goods. But that's not what's happening here. The current annualized inflation rate is 7.5%. But when you break that down by spending category, you'll see that the price increases from energy and new and used cars are responsible for half of that 7.5%. Price increases are due to supply constraints. So I'm sure everyone's heard about semiconductor chip shortage affecting the supply of new cars, which is prompting buyers to substitute used cars and drives up the price. And the energy price is a bit more complex, but I think everyone would agree that people don't go out and spend their extra money on more gas and electricity. So why am I telling you this? I keep hearing people in positions of power point to the big scary debt number and point to record inflation and say, see, we can't devote federal budget dollars to things like paid family leave or green energy or rental assistance programs. And it's just not true. These myths are causing direct harm to vulnerable people today and are laying the groundwork for harm to our future generations. So please vote this amendment out of committee. And with that, be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Next proponent. One more time, next proponent. Next, do we have letters of support?
No. Yes.
We have 58 letters of support. They'll be listed in the record. I'm not going to read them all off right now. Next up, we'll have opponent. Any opponents? Welcome to your Urban Affairs Committee.
Thanks, sir. Chairman Wayne and members of the Urban Affairs Committee, my name is Lee Will, Leewill, and I'm the State Budget Administrator of the Department of Administrative Services Budget Division. I'm appearing today representing Governor Ricketts to help inform the conversation around AM 1737 and to provide information about Emergency Rental Assistance Program known as ERAP 1 and the available federal funding for ERAP 2. The U.S. Treasury provided $200 million in February 21 to the state of Nebraska for ERAP 1. The Budget Division partnered with the Military Department and the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority, or NIFA, to provide aid to eligible renters in need. The state also contracted with 15 or so community collaboratives to assist with this effort. The $200 million provided to the state was initially allocated by the federal government in the following amounts: state of Nebraska, $158.6 million, Omaha, $22.2 million, Lincoln, $13.5 million, Douglas County, $4.3 million, and Lancaster County, $1.4 million. The state undertook marketing efforts, which included printed ads, social media, radio ads, and billboards. Outreach efforts also included communications and presentations through Nebraska via the Continuum of Care Network, the State Central Navigation Network, and the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, Long-Term Recovery Group Network. Outreach was also made with the Volunteer Lawyers Project, which works with the Tenants Assistance Project. NIFA appeared before several groups of service providers and landlords to explain the ERAP application process and provided guidance whenever requested. They participated in landlord summits in Fremont, Kearney, Crete, and North Platte. They also used ERA clinics and open houses organized by local providers to offer technical assistance and help coordinate and support these efforts.
Early in the implementation of the program, I spoke to U.S. Treasury officials and let them know that the formula for determining the allocation of funding was disproportionate to need based on the amount of funding coming into the state versus the localities. And to shorten my testimony a little bit, $84.7 million was allocated to the communities, and you can see in the testimony where those funding went. I also wanted to address the Homeowners Assistance Fund, last paragraph, and provide some information around that. So this $50 million specific ARPA program was recently announced by the governor with the assistance of NYFA for homeowners who experience a hardship related to COVID-19 and have equal or less than 100% of area median income of the county of residence. The application for this program can be found at haf.nyfa.org or dial 844-565-7146. These two programs can work in concert to assist both renters and homeowners impacted by the pandemic. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Chairman Wayne. What is the reason?
What is the reason?
What is the reason for opposition?
What is the reason? Because the amendment is to make the governor apply for emergency rental assistance. He doesn't believe it's a need for the state.
Okay. Do you have any response to the comments that were made by other testifiers about the
portal?
The administration, the portal, the administration, the way that seems to be clogging people up.
Yeah, I think there was two paths you could essentially take, and somebody behind me kind of talked about the self-attestation route or putting, implementation or fraud mitigation places in check. So you could say, my name is Lee Will, I reside at this residence, my income is this, and I am due rental payments. Or you could go down the path of, hey, we're going to take driver's licenses, we're going to take that pay stub, we're going to take all these things to inherently make sure that there's no fraud in the program. And I heard you reference the 840 cases. Those have been turned over to the auditor. And also FBI opened up a portal that we're gathering all the information to submit onto the FBI. Because those are international IP addresses, local enforcement don't have the ability to bring in those actors.
Okay.
I got a few questions. So right now the state has 32 million available.
Correct. Yes.
Above it said you only had 14 million utilized 14 million. So let me understand this right. We paid 8 million to an organization to distribute 14 million.
Up to, and that's part of the problem with the program is it's so cumbersome, Senator Wayne. And the other thing is,
okay, let's pick this apart though.
Yes.
So if it's so cumbersome, how come the city of Omaha and Lincoln can get rid of theirs?
They're relying, well, city of Omaha I can't speak for, but Lincoln specifically is relying on self-attestation. And that is what I'm said. I'm Lee Will, I reside at this place and I'm due this amount of cash.
So then if they're relying on that and clearly it's more efficient because you just reallocated $84 million to those.
More efficient, but more fraud, arguably.
So is the governor's position, and this isn't fair to you because he's not here testifying, but is the governor's position, why wouldn't the governor just apply for it and then turn it back over to the same work to the local organizations?
Well, Treasury has to provide for the ability to voluntarily reallocate. So that takes the risk off of the state and then puts it on the locality, right?
But there isn't any restrictions of allowing a grant process to provide to organizations to distribute the funds.
Yes, but they would still be in a sub-recipient relationship and the state would be responsible for any fraud mitigation. And we have talked about the 10% housing stability services towards the end of the program, utilizing that with the end of the program to help those folks, with that $10 million or so.
So why is the governor willing to do homeowners but not
renters? Renters got $200 million and they got it a year ago. Homeowners throughout this whole pandemic did not receive assistance through a program. That was passed in the CARES Act, in the ARPA bill. So it was $200 million for renters, $50 million for homeowners.
So it is the governor's position that the need is not there.
It is the governor's position that the need is going to be taken care of through the end of the year. And this rent will probably, if we did apply, go for another 3-year period. When you look at the economic impact, if you look at the economics within the state, 1.7% unemployment, there are opportunities there. I believe that we are taking care of those that are impacted by the pandemic. The program through the end of September will be around 2 years and will provide for up to 15 months of rental assistance.
So what you heard just for an hour now is a lot of people talking about need. So
Yes.
where's the disconnect between the governor's office and all these people who testified?
Well, I think the data, Senator, I mean, we've seen $14.7 million actually applied and be approved. I do hear some stories of need, but we're just not seeing it through a year of running the program.
You just reallocated money though.
We reallocated it to
from rural Nebraska to urban
That's
Nebraska.
correct. And Treasury actually asked if we wanted to reallocate any more funds. I asked the localities if they needed any funding through the end of this year, and they indicated they did not.
So
other
if
than Douglas County.
85% of the evictions that are seen in Douglas County and Lancaster County are based off of lack of payment.
Yep.
How does that data not support need?
So part of the issue with this, and I had a call with the localities, is the state of Nebraska authorized a voluntary reallocation process towards the middle of December. Those payments have still not gone to the city of Lincoln yet. So city of Omaha had to pause applications because the $50 million that we voluntarily reallocated, the U.S. Treasury took 2 months to get them the dollars.
I appreciate your answer, but you didn't answer the question.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat it?
The question is, if 85, and the stats are 85% of the evictions in Douglas County and Lancaster County are based off of failure to make a payment.
Yes.
How does that not establish a need?
I petitioned those localities to run those programs, and I said $11.7 million is going to be clawed back by the federal government. This was last week. Only Douglas County intimated that they need another $1 million to maintain their program through the end of the year.
So you're saying Douglas County, Douglas County is saying they don't need the money?
They said that they needed $1 million, and we wrote into Treasury to try to get them another $1 million out of that $12 million that Treasury is going to recoup from us.
I'll follow up with Douglas County on that. I find that hard to. I mean, you're more welcome to come with me on it any day. We can go in county court and see all the people. It's 30 to 40 evictions almost daily.
I appreciate that.
But Senator Wayne, the data doesn't show that.
Well, again, I talked to the localities, and they indicated that the data does not show that. So I actually talked with those folks that are running that program, and they said it's not needed. So I don't know who else to ask in that community.
Well, if the math doesn't add up, then all of these people who came here to testify must not know what they're talking about. Is that your position?
That's
in the
not my
governor's
position. I think that's putting words a little bit in my
What do
mouth.
you say to people where that's how they hear it?
I think that he's making decisions based on data. So right now we've used $14.7 million out of $158 million. We have talked with all localities to make sure that the rent is going to be in place through the end of this fiscal year, or through the end of the calendar year, excuse me. So that is 2 years of rental assistance that we have been paying out for COVID. ERAP 2 no longer needs COVID-related impact. Now, you could structure it that way, but the federal government is giving another $120 million to help for another assistance program for another 3-year period. I mean, at some point, the assistance has to end.
Why is it fiscally responsible to take all of this assistance that Nebraska taxpayers have already paid for and give it to another state?
Sure. So that's a fair question. I look at the initial allocation of the $200 million was the floor, right? So the Low Income Housing Coalition did a study on New York for each needy renter, which is 30% or under AMI. New York received $1,300. For Nebraska, they received $3,800 per renter. So we can see it's obviously more expensive to live in New York and others, and those states are asking for more dollars. They are out of money. We are not out of money.
So it's out of the goodness of our hearts.
I don't
Because we
understand.
want
the
to be
question.
charitable to the other states and we want.
No,
to
it's because they're out of money and
their
they
people are okay.
are showing that they have a need. We are not showing that same need.
I heard a lot of need in this room today, so.
And we have reallocated those dollars
I
through the
have
end
to
of the
say,
year.
it took you a lot of guts to come in here and say all that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So clearly Grand Island has a need.
Yes.
How are you going to work with Grand Island to address that need?
Well, some of the testifiers I heard are saying, 3-hour wait time. I've seen under a minute as the average. So I took those cards to make sure I could follow up to see what's going on with those cases, because that doesn't sound like an officially run program when you hear 3 hours long. If there's a need in Grand Island, I would want them to reach out to us, NIFA, to see what that is. And I think we are going to use those housing stability services toward the end of this program to help some of those communities like the nonprofits that they talked about.
So if this bill passes, the governor's position, he's not going to apply?
If this bill passes?
Yes.
That's the governor's prerogative. I'm not in the chair to answer that question. You'd have to follow up with him.
Is the need not there, or is it the problem with the portal? And how have you deciphered that?
Again, we're talking about how much, we talked about the UI trust fund last year. There's day-longs hearing about how there's fraud within that program. If you think there's fraud within the unemployment trust fund, I would, I hear California talk about 1% fraud. It's easy to not have fraud if you ain't looking for it. And they rely on self-attestation. If you're not bringing in IDs, you're not bringing in pay stubs, you're not bringing in all these things that try to find those actors, you're not going to find it. I mean, I think those are the things that we did here through mitigation, and some may find it cumbersome. I would say that we're not paying fraudulent actors.
Self-attestation is only for COVID, and it's only if you don't have a job. It's not for ID purposes.
For Oregon specifically, you could self-attest what your wage are, why you're impacted by COVID. There were a lot of things in other states that they could do self-attestation.
So is it the portal though? I didn't understand your answer to his question.
What portal? Excuse me.
Is there no need, or is the portal jamming people up? And you say, well, they're so cumbersome. It's so cumbersome. So we're really doing our best with the portal. Why is it cumbersome?
Because it's cumbersome because you have to have the tenant come into the portal. You have to have the landlord come into the portal.
Who made the portal?
Treasury requires that you go through fraud mitigation tactics, and they have things that you have to go through and comply with. You have to get AMI statements. You have to receive driver's license. You have to make sure. Now, they did later on say, well, we're going to allow you the ability to self-attest. But I can tell you that they're going to come back later and make sure that you didn't have fraud in your program as well.
Who made Nebraska's portal?
Who made it?
Yeah.
Deloitte.
I have a few
So
more.
so Deloitte made a cumbersome portal that is preventing people from accessing funds.
Deloitte
that
put-
has caused the governor to think nobody needs funds.
Deloitte put mitigation places in place to make sure that there wasn't fraud that we heard about for days on end on the fraud within the unemployment insurance fund. We are making sure that that does not occur within this program.
Well, I'm glad Deloitte made some money.
And the federal government provided up to 10% for admin because they knew that this program was going to be cumbersome to run, Senator.
Absolutely. So you said that the assistant has to end. My question to you is, why does the assistant have to end?
I mean, if you're looking at the economic value and we have 1.7%, I think you have to offer that there are opportunities out there. Now we have to connect those people with those opportunities, but it is time that at some point it's not a COVID related impact anymore. And we have to get back to after COVID.
So then are we after COVID now?
I don't believe so. I would hope by the end of this year we would be.
But does the governor feel the same? Does the governor feel the same way about all the aid we give to farmers? The assistance we give them? When does that assistance have to end?
I think that's outside of this conversation, Senator.
I don't think it is, because it's federal dollars and it's what we apply for all the time, right? It's federal dollars and we're assisting. In fact, the governor has a budget that deals with ARPA funds that has to deal with COVID.
Yes.
And he wants to provide renter assistance for commercial property, commercial landowners.
Yes.
Why are they getting a break but not homeowners? I mean, not renters.
Renters received $200 million throughout this onset. Commercial real estate received $0. During the CARES Act, we took care of convention centers, we took care of complexes, we took care of all those things, and commercial real estate was not part of that. What we're seeing is small businesses aren't able to make their obligations. Inherently, we're having commercial real estate not able to operate. Nobody wants to see a dilapidated commercial building in their legislative district, and we're afraid if we don't support that, it may happen.
Do you think any of those business owners are renters?
Absolutely, yes. It's not eligible under this program. It's only for residential.
Can you give us the exact amount that we've sent, what Deloitte has billed and we've paid up to this day?
I can get you that information. The one thing I would caveat is as part of that cost is to run the contact center. So that'll be with 2 years, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So, you do hear Deloitte and the accounting and other things, but the vast majority of the cost is to run that call center for 2 years time frame. And that's within that $8.9 million up to amount.
I would also like to know the call times.
Sure. Yeah. We're under a minute now. I know that.
Where were you before?
I want to say a minute and a half. I actually checked with the testifier, said he was on the line for 3 hours because I had never heard that case, and I want to kind of follow up to see what happened there.
Well, this just might have became a committee priority for me. So
I have a question.
Thank you. One more question.
Are landlords eligible for the homeowners assistance fund?
No, I don't believe so.
If you're a landlord, you're not eligible for the homeowners
No.
assistance fund?
I don't believe so.
You're sure about that?
I'd have to double check with you. I may be mistaken
You
on
should
that.
double check.
Okay. Because they own a rental unit, or you're saying that they can also receive homeowners assistance?
That's the way I read it.
Okay. I can follow up with you, Senator.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Lowe, Arch, Breezy, Blood? Okay. Thank you for being here today. Any other opponents? I'm still, anyway, anybody in the neutral capacity? Senator Hansen, would you like to close?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Wayne. Thank you, Senator Hunt. Thank you, members of the committee who gave up their lunch hour to be here. A couple things, just kind of logistically first. One, the Apartment Association of Nebraska wanted to testify in support. They had an issue with a COVID exposure. They couldn't attend. I believe that letter's already been passed out, but I just wanted to say that.
Can I hop in here and ask you this real quick? When have them two ever came together in front of Urban Affairs?
Sorry?
When have those two organizations ever came together?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to upset them in judiciary in about like 20 minutes too. This is a rare meeting of the minds between direct service providers, landlords, people, like just everyone. I mean, and that's kind of the odd thing for the service.
Go ahead.
No, I appreciate it. A couple other things. Some of the things that we're proposing to use from ARPA money could potentially be used by this money if we accepted it. I think some of the ARPA bills and appropriations deal with homelessness or utilities that could conceivably fall under this statute.
So it's not just that funds applied for through the portal. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
all activated.
So there's that. Additionally, kind of the notion on fraud. I will point out that again, fraud, including like in Lincoln, I'm pretty confident that 100% of Lincoln's assistance or nearabouts went directly to the landlord. So for in order there to be like a legitimate fraudulent case, I presume you would have to create a fake landlord organization to accept the check, because again, it's not going to the tenant, it's going to the landlord. It's direct assistance in that direction. And then finally, kind of in addressing the closing, it kind of seems like the governor's position is that in order to avoid a single case of fraud, it's worth it to just not accept the money. And again, to see that we have some need and some existence, but it's going to expire in September of this year. We kind of have 3 years to go back and forth to keep going. And kind of the notion of, as you pointed out, post-COVID, I mean, we've had senators test positive. Well, I'm wearing an N95 today because I was almost a close contact this week. Like we're not out of this. And additionally, even if somebody has gone and weathered COVID pretty well, I don't think there's anybody who can't afford their rent, who, if you survived COVID in some sort of way where you didn't get laid off, you didn't get furloughed, you didn't get downsized, if you somehow, the supply chain didn't impact you, increased prices didn't impact you, if you somehow managed all of that and weren't impacted by COVID, you're not struggling to meet your rent. Even if you today are fully employed, you burned down your savings, you took out a loan, you did what you needed to do over the past 2 years. I'm appreciative to hear this is a priority. It's a priority of mine, and we're going to work to get it done, whatever it takes. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Senator Hunt?
On the idea that the help has to end. We have to stop giving money at some point because COVID is going to be over, and hopefully by the end of this year, the opponent of the bill testified that he does think we're still in COVID, and hopefully it's over by the end of the year. But we have to apply for this by what date?
March 30th.
So by not applying for these funds, we are taking the bet that we're not going to have any more COVID expenses or jobs lost or time taken off work or evictions after March 31st.
Basically.
That's how I heard that too. Thank you.
No.
Again, we have no letters of opposition, no letters of neutral, 58 letters of support. Thank everybody for coming down today. And I thank you, Lee, for coming from the governor's office. I appreciate it. That ends the hearing on AM 1737. Thank you.